Welcome back to Bourbon Banter. We are going to dive into a really fun topic today, automation. We were given a story from a friend right here in our backyard, actually, about GE Appliance Park, which if you aren't familiar, it's where GE now, I guess owned by High Air, manufactures all of its small appliances. They are rolling out an autonomous fleet of, I call them delivery vehicles, but they're really just interdepartmental or intercampus vehicle fleet, moving parts from manufacturing to distribution within this giant campus that they have here in Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah. Automation is a big, scary word that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So we're going to dive into that topic today. A little bit about GE, a little bit about automation in general, and what that really means for the industry. So, buddy, why don't you kick us off here?
Well, first, kudos to GE, because automation is going to be critical to every business moving forward. And I had to take a second glance at the article because my first take was that GE was rolling out autonomous vehicles, and I was like, wow, that is to go from a dishwasher to an autonomous vehicle is a big shift. And then you start diving in further, and you identify like, oh no, it's not the autonomous vehicles that they're putting on the road. They're actually, the whole premise is see if I got this right, is basically the campus that they have here is enormous, and the amount of time and energy that it takes a body to physically move trucks around the yard is immense, and trying to find people to do that anymore is hard. And so they've deployed technology that actually automates that process. So it will move the container from one dock to another without the intervention of humans, which is, I think, is stupendous, because you start identifying monotonous work. I mean, unhitching and hitching and trying to hop in and move a trailer from point A to point B, which is literally in the same location. So kudos to GE. It's fascinating to see that it's taken this long, but two, that they're leading the charge.
Yeah, not the most fulfilling job if you think about just driving back and forth in the same plot of land. But what I found most striking about it was not the automation, but was really the narrative around it. When I looked at the article and I thought about how it would have been written 10 years ago, it would have been GE eliminates X number of jobs with, autonomous delivery vehicles. And this one was written, I think, much more from a 360 perspective. There were environmental impacts, benefits to that. Obviously, there's some cost savings on their end that they can, pass along, hopefully, to the consumer or to their employees. And I think you made a great point too, which is they're not eliminating work that we would consider inspiring. Sure, there are jobs that get impacted when things like that happen, but I think the hope is that you're upskilling your employees and giving them opportunities to advance in the company. And I just think the article was written with a much wider lens than maybe it would have been in the past. So do you think that the world is coming around to automation and thinking about it differently?
Hallelujah. Yes, I think it's finally time, right? You're right. A decade ago, the article would have been spun that GE is eliminating positions and they're trying to figure out how to finagle their way out of hiring people. But, the world that we live in today has changed drastically. And part of what the change is you're employing me to do a job. That job I want to find value in. And if it contains a tremendous amount of monotonous tasks that add little to no value to me personally, obviously they're valuable to you or I wouldn't be doing them. I don't want to do that anymore. And we have generations that are coming up now that are saying no, which kudos to them, right? I mean, the days of like, I just jump in and I just do what they tell me because I'm a corporate guy. I think those are days of the past. And I think now the corporations are having to rethink and reevaluate, which is this, you and I talk about it all the time, right? It's like, how did the automobile come about when the horse and buggy was just fine? Right? It was just fine. Like it had wheels, it would roll. You could get it from point A to point B. It would carry things. You could, the horses, as long as you fed them and kept them healthy, right? They were, so why do I need an automobile? Like, what is an automobile going to do for me? And we did a lot of study on that as we launched our business. We identified like, wow, there was a tremendous amount of pushback for multiple decades against the automotive industry. And here we are today. Like, can you imagine? Like we if the horse and buggies would have won out, like this is.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a great point. And I think when you're able to zoom out and look at something from a historical perspective like that, obviously it makes sense.
Sure.
But when you're in the middle of it, there is maybe call it an irrational fear. It's not always irrational because jobs are impacted as industries transition to more efficient means of production. What I would love to see is, to steal a phrase from the tech world, is an approach called planned obsolescence, but in employment. So think about your own career. Every 10 years, you're in a much different spot. You're continually learning, you're upskilling, whether that's through a program that's defined or you're just taking on new projects. I think that's how we have to approach employment in general, is that we are going to continually look for productivity gains, ways to be more efficient as people, as companies, as human beings. Why don't we plan for that? Why don't we plan to eliminate the menial tasks? Like you're saying, driving from distribution to manufacturing that's 100 yards away. Shouldn't we aspire for more meaningful, more challenging, more thoughtful forms of employment if we can?
Absolutely.
The problem is we don't plan for that. And then entire industries are uprooted and you have ghost towns and you have, people out of the labor force because we pretend like those things aren't going to happen.
Correct.
And so how do we get to a point where planned obsolescence is part of our career paths?
That's, we'll acknowledge reality, right? Reality is the needle's going to move. Are you going to be a part of the movement or are you going to be a part of the past? Because the horse and buggy is a perfect example, right? The pushback was from the stable hands, right? The people that physically made the harnesses, the entire industry that was developed to support that unique form of transportation. And of course they wanted to stand their ground and say, no, automobiles are going to kill people. And they did. But at the end of the day, the ability to advance from an efficiency perspective far outweighed the risk associated with the vehicle itself. The advancements over the course of multiple decades with all the safety and all the things that have happened. And now we're sitting in automobiles that can drive themselves, which is pretty wild. But you start looking at the advancement of that. It all started because there was an opportunity for change in moving things along better, faster, quicker, and the elimination of this slow, cumbersome, burdensome path. And the big part of that is you start identifying specifically manufacturing and distribution. I know we're going to talk about this in future episodes, but there's some things that we're dealing with today that are tides of the past that are now presenting themselves. So we have to address them so the future looks different. One of those being, hey, we've always done it like this, right? This is, that's why I said kudos to GE. It's like, yeah, we've always done it like this. We've always somebody hopped in the trailer, they drove it, 10 minutes around the corner, they piled it in and they sat and waited and then they jumped back in and moved it back around. Well, just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean that it's the best way to do it. And it's easy to continue that path when there's a plethora of people out there willing to do that. Not anymore. So I don't know anybody that's willing to say, hey, you know what, I'd love to do that for the rest of my life. Like, no, like you're talking about. People want to jump in, they want to add value, and they want to feel like there is a path to more. And I think that's a unique thing. And I'm of the age where I sit in the middle, right? I'm in my 40s, so you've got the younger generation and you've got the baby boomers, and I relate to both, right? There's both of me, or both of them in me. So I see the dichotomy, but I also have a significant appreciation for both generations. So I get to take both and kind of couple them together and get the best of everything. Where, just like anything else, right? If you're far right or far left and get too far, all of a sudden it becomes, whoa, like you're, all right, now things have gotten out of kilter. But it's exciting, man. I think it's going to be a game-changing thing for the industry as a whole.
Well, I think some of the sort of macroeconomic, macro-environmental factors that we're seeing take place this year, last year, are driving some of this. Like you said, people are harder to find, they're more expensive. But when you look at things like how do you increase GDP? How do you increase the standard of living for people in this country? Well, you do that through productivity gains. Right now, we're fighting some pretty heavy inflation. I think in the Journal, among other places today, they reported that we had 7.5% inflation year over year, which is the highest it's been in many, many decades. So how do you offset that? With efficiency, with productivity gains. How do you do that when people aren't willing to work 75 hours doing the same task over and over again? Mm-hmm. You automate it.
That's right.
So I think there's the moral, ethical side of it, of what happens to these jobs. But I also think there's the humanity-wide viewpoint of, for us to continue to progress and enjoy a better life, we have to find a way to take care of things automatically that don't need our attention, so that we can focus people on more meaningful, more challenging tasks that move the ball forward. And I think that's part of why the conversation has changed. It used to be this zero-sum thinking of, well, if you automate it, then we've got 10% of the workforce that's going to fall out, and they're going to become part of a welfare state, and that's a drain on the economy. But if we flip our thinking and we do that proactively, now of course you have to have a plan for people. Because I think there really are impacts to jobs when that stuff happens. But I think if we can embrace it and start thinking about automation as a positive, we can flip that whole dichotomy and get into a much better place where we're creating awesome jobs. We're all enjoying higher wages. We're working less often, fewer hours. And that's really what we all want. So that was why I called out the narrative in the very beginning was interesting to me, because I think the world is coming around to automation, and it's not always this giant thing. We like to talk about autonomous cars because it's crazy cool. Yeah. Sometimes it's just the small tasks that we have to do every day. If we can take those off our plate, and that frees you up. If you get 10% of your time back and you work a 40-hour week, you just got 4 hours back that you could spend doing something 100% much more meaningful or leisure.
Well, and automation's been going on for decades in manufacturing, right? I mean, you walk into factories. I was looking at pictures of Tesla, and it was like, this is really amazing. This is outstanding. But you start identifying, right? And I think the whole point of the script flipping and the fact that it's no longer elimination of jobs is what organizations, right? What differentiates organizations? You start going, okay, well, product used to be the thing. It was like, my product's better than your product, buy my product instead of their product. And you start really diving in, and you start going, well, the brand is really what is meaningful, right? I'm passionate about this brand. And when you find passionate people about a brand, you usually find wonderful culture within the brand itself. So how do you create wonderful culture? Well, you create meaningful jobs, right? The value is bigger than just, okay, we've got a lot of people doing a lot of monotonous things that create value for our customers, because you're not going to have champions internally, which means you're not going to have champions externally. So at the end of the day, what are you trying to do, right? You're trying to not eliminate positions. You're trying to repurpose these people to do more meaningful and valuable things to change the culture and the landscape of your organization. And that's what automation can do, which why, I'm happy to see, GE being in our backyard is wonderful, but I'm happy to see it moving throughout organizations. And it's been forced, right? Some of this is frankly because I can't find people to do this work anymore. which is a wonderful predicament for organizations to be in. It doesn't feel like that, I know, because most companies, specifically in manufacturing and distribution today, are up to their ears and eyeballs in work. But when you can take a step back and you can make that adjustment and you can move your company forward, man, culture changes and it differentiates your business, not just internally, but it also differentiate your business externally, because that culture, that energy, that attitude, it moves from inward to outward.
Couldn't agree more. And I think companies that are embracing it have to start with taking inventory of what it is they do every day. One of the things I've observed is that a lot of companies know on an abstract level, when I say companies, I mean leadership, how things get done, but the nuts and bolts, not so much,
Yeah.
which is normal, right? If you're in a leadership position of a large company, you're not always going to know what's happening on the floor day in and day out. It'd be nice, but usually not where your focus is. But take the time to take inventory of what are people doing, what steps are they engaged in, what systems are they using, and then you can start to evaluate, are there tools, technologies, solutions that we can use to bring in automation? And again, they don't always have to be these leaps forward. They can be incremental gains that end up on a large organization having a really material impact.
Yeah.
So I think it just starts with taking inventory of what it is you do and how you do it. And it's surprising to me how few companies are really looking at that. I think now the tide's changing a little bit, to your point, with it just being harder to find people. They're looking for those efficiency gains, but that's something I'd like to see happening more proactively, especially in mature operating companies where the processes have been set for many, many years, because you just know there are going to be better ways to do it. But, change is hard. And I think that's why, sometimes you need to take a few steps back and do that sort of self-assessment.
Yeah, the change piece is hard, and it is an undertaking, and it requires commitment. And those are things that are sometimes perceived as challenges. But the best organizations, the one that are most nimble, the one that that win consistently, are the ones that don't look at it as a challenge. They look at it as an opportunity. Right? It's no longer a challenge that is in front of me. It's an opportunity for me to be able to make investments in things that are going to make our company better, our people better, our industry better. And I think those are the ones that you're going to see, the ones that look at it. I mean, we kid about it all the time. It was, as we work in the industry, you've got the investment in the technology. So if you look at the stack of technology in these organizations, specifically distribution manufacturing, you look at major investments in the financial infrastructure, right? The ERP or the DMS, right? This thing that manages the numbers, the accounting system. And then you might have some type of CRM-esque type technology. But then you look in the middle of the operations, right? The heartbeat of the business. And you're like, so how does that work? And most organizations are like, it's an Excel spreadsheet, shared drives, and emails. And you look and you're like, but that was technology that was created in the 1980s. And that's the dominant technology utilized to run the heartbeat of your business. So same with us, right? We see it in these organizations, and now we're seeing the shift, which is this, you're right. Like, I've got robots working in the back of my factory, but I'm still pushing paper around my office. Now that you said that, right? Now that you've brought that to my attention, we should address that.
Well, I think the technology industry did itself no favors with things like digital transformation and, these big scary words where you feel like I'm going to have to completely upend the way that I work every day. And the reality is embracing incrementalism is a really, really good thing. If you are of that mindset that we're going to embrace change, then it no longer has to be this inflection point decades in the making of how do we reshape our operations.
Absolutely.
Bake it into your culture that, here are our values. We value efficiency.
Yep.
We value challenging ourselves and finding ways to be better, to better serve our customers. And then hopefully what you build is a culture of problem solvers within.
Correct.
So you're not getting to this point where it's like, how do we unwind 20 years of bad habits because we've not been continually adopting and evolving with the times. It's hard, though. It's easy for me to sit here and say that. And I recognize that when you're growing a business, that you're thinking about a million other things besides your own kind of internal operations. You're figuring out product, you're figuring out distribution, marketing, how to hire people, all this stuff.
And pricing, competition.
It's easy. And that's why I think sometimes it bringing in partners can be a good thing too, because they have a completely objective outside perspective. And, we need that in our own lives. We need feedback from other people because we don't always see our own flaws.
Yeah, agreed.
So I think automation, I think the narrative is changing. I think the undertone of it being this huge, monumental task is really starting to go away. And companies like GE, not to disparage them, they're not always thought of as the most innovative. It's more of an old guard company, but they're showing that, hey, this is a small thing they're doing.
Yep.
On the grand scheme of things, with meaningful impact to their organization. So I think by them doing this, it's really setting a good example and model for other companies that we should look at that. Is that something that we can, do more efficiently today, even if it's not complete automation? So I'm excited to see what is going to happen over the next decade, especially with the external pressures we've talked about, almost forcing the hand of companies to look at efficiency.
Yeah, the companies that aren't focused on massive efficiency transitions as well as the use of automation, it's going to be a tough road. Because you look at the gap, if there is a gap today, and those companies continue to invest in maximizing efficiency and ensuring that their workforce is doing meaningful and valuable work, and the culture that they've created is immense in its tangible, and their customers are raving, right? Like, how do you compete with that, right? So now's the time, right? To your point, it's easier today to invest in incremental growth through efficiency gains and automation than any other time in our history. So every organization should be evaluating and looking and trying to find how are they going to move the needle in that world.
Well, buddy, the bourbon was good, but the banter was even better.
Amen.
Cheers.
Always. Cheers. Thank you.